Thanks for joining us this afternoon, folks. As I've already said, my name is Craig Taylor. I'm a Customer Success Manager here at HT2 Labs. And for the past 3 weeks, 3 weeks or so, I have been facilitating a massive open online course, or MOOC, on the subject of fire safety training. But those of you that were on the course actually know it wasn't really about that. It was a subject within a subject. And the hidden subject I wanted to get across was getting people to rethink how they deliver compliance training themselves. If you could let me know in the chat panel now, in as few words as possible, broadly speaking, how does your organisation deliver compliance training? Is it traditional e-learning? Is it face-to-face? Is it something else? Use as few words as possible. Let's just have a look at what compliance training looks like in your organisation. Bought-in packages, e-learning through Cornerstone. I'm guessing when we say e-learning, we're talking about SCORM type objects, traditional self-paced click next objects. Andrews is e-learning and classroom training. Just want to give people a few more moments. I can see that multiple people are typing. Self-paced, click through. Chantel's confirming that there. Thank you, Chantel. Jonathan's saying they've got a little bit of instructor-led or face-to-face, as we might call it, e-learning, SOPs, standard operating procedures, on-the-job training. Vanessa looks like she's almost got a fresh field, a brownfield site, if you like, to start building from. I know you're building the ecosystem. Thank you for sharing that. I do appreciate you kind of giving us an insight into what you're doing and how you're doing it. And there were a few variations in that. It was nice to see things like on-the-job training and standard operating procedures, not just classroom training or traditional e-learning. Good to see that. Let's have a look at what we're going to cover today then. There's a heck of a mouthful there, but I think it's important that I covered everything. We're going to look at how Curatr provides not only the tick in the box that's often needed for compliance subjects, but how it can also give you a deeper insight into people's responses, making them make commitments, interactions, contributions. I wanted to include this in this webinar because early on in the MOOC, I asked the question, and I am paraphrasing here, what's the biggest challenge that you would face if you were to try and adopt the approach that I'm taking in this MOOC? What challenges would you face? What hurdles would you face? What pushback would you face? And lots of people gave lots of answers. The nub of it really was the desire or the requirement to prove that somebody did it. Bums on seats, tick in the box, attendance, whatever you want to call it, that seemed to be the number one factor, maybe not for you as L&D professionals, but for your organisation, you had to prove that they did it. Does that sound familiar? Let me know in the chat panel. Have I got those same people on this course? A resounding immediate yes from Chantel. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I've worked in enough compliance-driven organisations, healthcare, financial services, the nuclear industry, the MOD, to know that, like it or not, it is a requirement. So we can't just shrug that off and say it doesn't fit good adult learning principles. It's not pedagogically sound. It's tough. It's one of the factors that we need to take into account. And that's what I'm hoping that we can get across in today's webinar. So we're going to be looking at the tick in the box, as well as what I would consider to be more valuable to the organisation, but not at the expense of the tick in the box. It's a nice, you can please all parties, I think, or many parties. We'll never please everybody. We're also going to have a look at how xAPI, if you don't know what it is, don't panic, don't turn the webinar off, don't run away. I am going to keep it really simple and really basic because it can get quite complicated quite quickly. That's not my job today. I'm going to introduce you to a concept to show how you could take a more modern approach to compliance training as well as satisfying that tick in the box. Let's just have a look at some of the comments. Lots of conversation. It's brilliant. Andrew's saying that auditors and regulators are very interested in training records. Chantel's agreeing with that. She's clearly seen that herself as well. Clinical research is all about compliance, Chantel is saying. Yeah, I kind of got the feeling that whoever turned up to this webinar would kind of be saying the same thing that the people in the MOOC were saying as well. But yes, in the ideal world, we'd have all these wonderful approaches that really tapped into adult learning principles, treated the learner like an adult, did all of these cool things. But yes, there's still that need to prove that it was done and there's a training history. And I'm not going to demean that. I'm not going to try and shy away from that. In fact, I'm going to show you how it can be done as well as other cool things as well. So I say as well as other cool things, let me show you some of those other cool things. I'm going to start sharing my screen with you in just a few seconds. Now, if you could just confirm to me in the chat panel that you can see the front end of the fire safety course, it'd be great if somebody could confirm that.
I can see it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Viv and Andrew and Jonathan as well for opening your mic up. Cheers, guys. I just wanted to confirm that before I went on. I know that not everybody in this webinar attended the MOOC. That's the homepage of the MOOC on the screen. Each of those rectangles, the 6 rectangles, is a level, a section, a chunk, whatever you want to call it. Within each of those chunks, there are pieces of content, most of which I have curated, didn't make them, didn't create them. I found them online and I brought them in and added what I hope you agree with me, those that did it, into a narrative that unfolded as you went through the course, from being quite conceptual and high level to being very, very close to home in more ways than one and very specific. That's the homepage that you are looking at on the screen there. As a reminder, once again, there's one of the levels. 3 pieces of content in this level. There's one of the pieces of content on the screen, which was a video from my boss, Ben. I won't play it. I just want to remind you about what the content looks like. There's a question in the top right-hand corner of the screen. You notice I've just highlighted it. And then below that, people left their, below that, people were able to leave feedback. Does that sound familiar to everybody? Does that sound like the experience that you had a few weeks ago? If not, one of us is in the wrong place, and I hope it's not me. Chantel's confirming that. Great stuff. Thank you. Cheers, guys, for confirming. Let me just close that down. So that was a brief overview of the course itself. Really, really high level, I must admit. I said that I wanted to show you how Curatr does not shy away from this tick in the box. So I'm going to go into the back end of Curatr now, if you'll join me. And you'll notice that the screen has changed and I can see a report for the fire safety course and I can see the leaderboard. This leaderboard contains everybody that registered for the course. And you'll notice towards the bottom of that list, we can see that there were 170 registrations in total. You'll notice towards the right-hand side that there is a column called course completed. And I'm going to filter that now to bring everybody that's completed the course so far to the top. And we'll see that 3 people have finished. Myself, Jonathan Rock, who's on the call, and Steve Batchelder, who unfortunately can't make it today but really wanted to. How is that course completion then registered? How is it marked? Let me give you an insight into what leads to this course completion mark. This course had 6 levels in it. I made those levels, or I gave those levels a percentage of difficulty. I either made them incredibly easy to pass and gave them 0% difficulty, or I made them harder to pass and gave them 80% difficulty or 100% difficulty. Curatr is very clever when it runs its algorithm, and what it's looking for is the point or the moment in time when you have passed every level to the minimum required. So if I set a level to 80% and you've got 79%, you haven't passed it. When you get that extra 1%, you've passed it. If you choose to go on and do more, Wonderful, excellent, well done. You still passed it at the 80% mark. And I like that Chantel's saying that she likes this concept of assigning difficulty. Once you have passed all 6 levels to the minimum required, boom, you get that tick in the box, that bums on seats in the course completed level or the course completed column there. So you can quite clearly see within Curatr, yes, it's got all of this nice, soft, fluffy social stuff around the edges. Actually, it's at its core, but it does not shy away from knowing that sometimes you need to know if people have done the minimum required. And in this particular course, you can see that 3 people so far have done that. Any questions on that? I hope it's quite a simple concept. You get a tick in the box when you've done the minimum required, just like everything else, really. So I'm just going to pause there and ask for any questions on this particular concept here before I move on.
Craig, it's Andrew. I'm really well. How are you?
Hey, Andrew, how are you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I'm not too bad at all, thank you. I feel like we should have a catch-up, but I'm sure the other participants wouldn't thank us for that.
You have a good question, though, so hopefully a good question. In terms of the time that it takes to complete this program that you've put together, what's the sort of average completion time? How long would somebody like Jonathan, for example, have spent on doing this?
That's a really good question. Looking at what we are looking at now, it's impossible with what I'm showing you to determine that. You could work it out if you had enough time. You could sit down and say, okay, here is all my content. Let me add up approximately, because remember, people read things at different speeds. People do things at different speeds. But you could make a best guess and say, to look at every piece of content in here would take me 2 hours, for example. If you're giving each level an 80% difficulty rating, what is 80% of 2 hours? Well, it's a rhetorical question because I'm not going to try and work it out. But whatever 80% of 2 hours is, you could say the minimum contact time that someone would need to have to pass this course would be 1 hour, X number of minutes. What is hard to tell is exactly how long it took Jonathan or Chantel or Viv or Andrew or Craig. You'd need to go and look at them individually. Thank you, Viv, 96 minutes. It was on the tip of my tongue as well. You'd need to go and look at them individually and work out how long they were in contact with the course. I don't know many people who've got the time to do that, particularly with an organisation as big as the one that you're talking about, Andrew. If you were to use xAPI, and that's why I wanted to stress that what I'm showing you on the screen now is difficult. If you were using something like xAPI, you could get a much closer to an accurate figure. It would still only be an estimate because just, you know as well as I do, just because a screen is open doesn't necessarily mean that I'm in contact with the screen. I could have wandered off for a coffee. I could be checking my emails on another monitor. I might be daydreaming. So it will get you closer to it using xAPI. It still wouldn't actually say, yes, Viv was in this course for 97 minutes and 17 seconds without a shadow of a doubt. So it's a long-winded way of saying, Andrew, there's no accurate way of knowing. But I would challenge any system that would suggest it knows exactly how long you've been in contact with the material, only how long the material's been open for. And clearly there could be a difference there. But a good question and a tough one. So thanks. Thanks, my friend. Any more questions on the course completed, the tick in the box, that the completion status there before we move on? If there are any, please do drop it into that chat panel. So there's the tick in the box, but I said that I think that Curatr can give you more than just that. Stuff that's possibly, in some contexts, more valuable than that. So let's go and have a look at it. I'm going to move to a different tab now that I've already got opened up. What I'm looking at here are the reports for each level of the course. So I can now see who has passed using this drop down here that I've just activated. level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to just filter level 1, and we can see that we've got, well, at least 25 people. It's dropped off the bottom of that page. 25 people have passed level 1. If I go and do the same thing with level 2, I suspect that's a large number of people. Yeah, that's a large number of people as well. So this would be a good way of getting a helicopter view, a report if you needed to provide that, about where are people in the overall program. Have they all finished? Well, the leaderboard can tell you that. If they haven't, and let's be honest, most of our students on this course haven't finished, whereabouts are they in the overall structure? So that's slightly more useful than just knowing that people have passed or not. Whereabouts are they in their journey? That could be useful to you. What I think could be even more valuable, using the next tab, I'm now going to run a report on the comments that were made. Remember how Curatr works. It gives you a piece of content to consider: video, e-learning, a webinar, a PDF, a PowerPoint, a blog post, an audio, a piece of audio. It could be anything digital. It asks you to consider it. It asks you a question about it, and then you answer that question. That's a comment. We can see here on this screen that all 6 levels are displayed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the names of the levels. And if I expand each one, I can see the objects that were in that level that had a question posed. I can see the number of comments that were made, 38 comments in response to the welcome video from Ben. If I expand that even further, we're at the vagaries of my internet. Thank you. We can now see specifically what did Craig say in relation to that question, or Wilfred, or Marie, or Jerome. So we can start to not just drill into, has Craig finished level 1? Yes. What did Craig do to finish level 1? What did he say? How did he respond? What questions did he ask? What was his behaviour like to pass level 1? Now, we're looking at this inside Curatr right now, and that's good. It's a nice, handy, portable way of doing it. What I am going to show you, though, is I'm just going to, once again, just tweak my screen around slightly. Hopefully I don't make you seasick along the way. What I have done is I've downloaded that report that's just disappeared. There it is. I've downloaded that report. I now have a CSV or a spreadsheet with every single comment that was made in that course. I'm sure there are hundreds, maybe thousands of them, probably hundreds of them. We can see that we have first name, last name, email address and organisation in the first columns. I've hidden people's emails names. I hope you'll understand why I've tried to obfuscate them. What I have paid attention to, though, is column F, the comments. We can now have a report that shows what everybody was saying in the course. Now, I want to pose this to you guys. I want to give you a chance to get back on those keyboards or that microphone. What value do you see in your organisation and your context with being able to see specifically what people said, or generally what the population was saying in relation to the content? Over to you. Whilst you're doing that, I'm just going to rearrange my screen again.
This is John Rock. I just had a couple ideas looking at this. Number one, like if you had any content that had like an essay question, you could pretty easily use a rubric and maybe even keywords to see how you're going to score that for that kind of content. Also for, part of my compliance is we have to annually review our trainers and see if they're still doing a good job. So you could use, something like this for, even after an instructor-led training or virtual or whatever, you could use it to capture the feedback that the audience has for what they think worked and what they didn't, and that could tailor how you approach coaching the trainers that you have. Those are my thoughts.
I would agree with everything that you've said there, Jonathan. I was nodding away furiously at this end, and Chantel agrees as well. Vanessa's talked about to identify challenging topics, identify popular topics. Yes, it's a good aspect, isn't it? Just because a topic isn't getting much comments, Doesn't mean to say it's a bad topic. Doesn't mean to say you, from an instructional design perspective, you need to ditch it from now. And if anything, maybe you need to focus on it more, because there's not a lot of conversation around it, and you think there should be. Just going to wait for anybody else to just type in any thoughts they've got about what they could do with having that insight into not just that Craig's passed it, Jonathan's passed it, Vanessa's passed it, Viv hasn't yet passed it, but what are they saying along the way? Give you a few more moments to just focus on that. I can also see in the attendee pod that a number of other people have joined us as well. Welcome. Sorry that we started without you, but we were keen to keep to time. But hopefully you're gathering the thread of this as we're going along, and hopefully the questions that I'm asking work on their own without having to be present at the beginning. So wherever you've come into this webinar, thank you. Jonathan, Emmett's suggesting it could be used to curate further content. ID need more help. The organisation needs clear. Everything that you are saying and typing into here, I agree with. Let me rattle a few off the top of my head that may or may not be exactly what you're saying. We can see where content is popular or not. We can analyse the words. My colleague Janet, who's a data scientist, has a wonderful process for doing semantic analysis of text. And she can then analyse what people's intentions are. Are they simply saying thank you for that piece of content? Are they saying I plan to do something with that content? Are they saying I have done something with that content? Clearly, from a behaviour change perspective, being able to see people's cognitive presence or planning or desired planning is a wonderful insight. Imagine the return on investment you could show if you were able to say, here's my new compliance program. Within a month of it launching, 35% of people have made a change in their behaviour. 20% are planning to make a change within their behaviour. Chantel's loving the idea of semantic analysis there. You could do something simple, like put it all into a word cloud, Wordle, something like that. Remove the common words, and then you could have a nice visual representation of what people were saying. And if you're aware of how word clouds work, then the bigger the words, the more popular it's being said. Is the most popular thing that's being said what you'd hoped it would be, or does it give you an insight into something you'd not perhaps suspected? And I think, just to touch on one last point that Viv made here, one of the tasks that I gave people to do in this MOOC, right towards the very end, right at the very beginning, was to say, what is working in your organisation in terms of a particular compliance subject? What's going well? And the next part of the question, what's not going well? Where isn't it working? Where isn't it being applied? Where is it broken? Imagine the insight that you could get if you were to ask people that question. They would give you an insight that it may be very difficult for you or your compliance subject matter experts to get, what it's like on the shop floor, at the coalface. What's broken? Wonderful piece of insight that you could get from analysing this mass of text there. On that point, and I won't labour this too much because it's just a slight variation in theme, one of the other things that you could do is I asked for people at the very end of the course, at the very end, to share with me an action that they were going to implement in the next week. Really quickly. This is fire safety. What are you going to do in the next week? Come on, tell me. 3 people have done that so far, and one of them's on the call. Thank you, Jonathan. So we could also capture that information and say, this is what people are doing as a result of our course. They haven't just got a tick in the box. They haven't just got 9 out of 10 so passed. They haven't just become another statistic. They've done those 3 things. They're also actually changing their behaviour. Wonderful insight if you're in the field of compliance. Or I hope it's a wonderful insight if you're in the field of compliance and it's not all about box ticking. Let me take one step back to take a slightly different direction. Before I do, though, this page will look familiar to you. It's the leaderboard report. I'm just going to pause once more. I'm going to come up for air and ask you guys if you've got any questions on what we've covered or are covering so far. Questions, comments, observations, anything like that. I don't want to go too far ahead without giving you the opportunity. Either everybody's dropped off the call or nobody's got anything. I really hope it's the latter.
Andrew,
I really hope you're all still there. So, John. Andrew. Yes.
I don't know if this is the right time to ask this question, but one of the things that I've been thinking about is this whole concept of curated content. Now, in your MOOC, you were able to curate some content around the topic of compliance training. And that's something that's been quite widely written about. There's some great articles out there, and you obviously found those information sources and those documents and used them to great effect. A lot of the training that I have to pull together, there simply isn't that content available. So for example, one of the things that I have to train on is Japanese firewall regulation. That's not something that's been widely written about. So one of the challenges I have is, where can I get this content from? Where can I curate this stuff from?
It's a very good point. Let me give you an overview on how I approach curation and then come back to you with an answer that blows that model out the water. I like to think of curation, thinking in thirds, I call it. Try and look in your own domain. Try and look for material you already have. PDFs, videos, it might be online, it might be a paper version. Look for stuff you've already got. That's curation in itself. That's just because you've created it, that's still curation. You're not building it from scratch. So your organization may already have some stuff, some material about Japanese firewalls. That's curation. You could curate content from outside of your organization, and that I can understand is where it gets tricky. One thing you might want to consider when your compliance subjects are quite niche, don't try and look for content that's specifically about Japanese firewalls. Why not look for content that is about stories about firewall breaches? Why not look for stories that are hard-hitting, make people think, worry people perhaps, about firewall breaches? Try and find those. They might not be specifically about Japanese files, but you're almost looking for the horror stories, if I want to use the phrase, horror stories about what happens if you get this wrong. And the other thinking in thirds is sometimes you have to create content from scratch. That MOOC that you're referring to, the one you've just done, Andrew, you're quite right. Most of that was curated. You will have noticed that there was the odd video here and there that I created to act as the glue to bring it all together, to give some context. So a great question. Think in thirds. You've already got content. Don't shy away from using it. And if you want to bring some stuff in from outside, try not to be too specific. Try and look for something that helps you sell your story. Try and give the what's in it for me, perhaps via a BBC news article or a Japanese news article.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you. I've just taken a step back. I've gone to the leaderboard here. I'm going to click on my name. And I'm going to click, we're now looking at my profile, by the way, across the entire site, not just the course, the entire Curatr site. I'm going to click on statistics, object views, comments, contributions, levels. I'm going to click on comments. I'm going to choose the course that I'm actually referring to today from this drop down. You can see that I'm enrolled on a lot of them. And we can now see just my comment. These are the comments that I have made in this particular course. This is useful for, as Andrew mentioned right at the beginning, what if you want to focus in on an individual to see what they did? His question admittedly was about how long were they in it, and I couldn't give him a fixed answer. But what did Jonathan do? What did Andrew specifically do? We can see what I said on this page. We can look at the object views, i.e. the pieces of content that I looked at on this page. We can also see how often I looked at them. The over to you object I looked at 14 times, whereas the video context setting I only looked at once. When did I look at them? So again, if you ever needed to drill down, as I know sometimes people need to from a forensic perspective when it comes to compliance, particularly if they've had a problem, you can go and look at what that individual did, not just in one course, but across potentially multiple courses. That could be useful to people as well. I'm going to step out of Curatr in a second or two, but before I do that, I just want to once again stand back and say, do you have any questions about anything Curatr-wise that I've mentioned, or indeed anything else Curatr-wise about reporting and compliance and analytics and data that I might not have mentioned? Jonathan's asked a good question here. How my org leans on our LMS to prove the compliance stream? How does a Curatr style course deal with LMS? Multiple responses to this, Jonathan. I think the easiest one is, and it's a cop-out, it depends. Curatr is perfectly capable of integrating using single sign-on, using LDAP, other types of technologies, with integrating with an LMS. So it's possible that if someone did a compliance course in Curatr, i.e. your completion mark that we've looked at over here, there's no reason at all, assuming that the connections were made and the integrations were made, there's no reason at all why that tick in the box couldn't be sent to your LMS if that is your single source of truth for reporting matters. So it depends. Perfectly capable though, but it depends on your LMS, the integrations, the connections, single sign-on, sending information, that sort of stuff as well. And it was a good question, I agree, Helen. Any more questions? I don't want to plough on just in case that spared another question from people. There you go, Andrew. You have a curation machine at your very fingertips. Vanessa sharing something with you there that you may find useful in the future. How does Curatr deal with issues that comments made in the course might be admissible as evidence for regulatory inspections or court cases? Wow, Viv, we've gone very deep very quickly. It doesn't deal with them any differently than your email system deals with them. It doesn't deal with them any differently than if someone were to, you know, send them in a text message or something like that. So it's, you know, the information is kept in here. If somebody makes a comment and it's inappropriate, it's kept. If someone makes a comment and it's deleted, actually it's not really deleted. It still sits in the server at our end, so it could be found. So from that perspective, you know, and it's a simple question that clearly can open up into all sorts of multiple questions. It doesn't behave any differently than any other electronic kind of system in terms of keeping that content. I guess one of the advantages, if someone, you were to send somebody something through text and deleted it, that may be harder to get that deleted text back from the service provider than it would be to get a deleted comment back out of Curatr. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing the screen, but this does not mean that I'm not going to field any more Curatr questions, because they may come up. It's just that, you know, I want to move things along. You can notice now on the main part of this screen, I'm asking you to list potential elements of a compliance program or campaign. Question there from Quentin that I will get to, Quentin, but I just want to start people off on this task about GDPR. What I'd like you to do is to spend a couple of minutes now listing elements that you think could form a compliance program or campaign. Don't think about what you do in your business now. Think about what you could do, what the art of the possible might be. So by all means, list what you do right now in your business, but then start to think about things like, what about QR codes? What about text messaging? What about VR? What about, just go mad, go crazy. The sky's the limit. Infographic, thank you, Andrew. The sky's the limit. Drop those into that list on the left-hand side of the screen here. Whilst you're doing that, I'm going to distract Quentin by talking about GDPR. What a wonderful subject for this time on a Tuesday afternoon. So Quentin, we are very, very aware of GDPR, you know, creeping ever, well, not even creeping, but rapidly coming towards us. It's already September 2017. So we're aware of GDPR. We are working with a number of specialists and experts. We've got an internal person that is very, very focused on data security, as well as the senior management within HT2. So right now, the honest answer is I don't know if Curatr right now is GDPR proof. What I do know is that a significant number of our clients are in parts of the world where GDPR will suddenly become a very harsh reality. So it will need to be, and it will be. Right this second, it probably isn't. When it needs to be, though, we've got people on the case that it will be. Yeah, I think anybody that plans to have a long-term business in this part of the world, Quentin, beyond next year needs to be paying close attention to it. And you can rest assured, I'm hearing a lot about it. I'm hearing a lot about it internally, so it's happening. So I'm not going to read through these in detail because there's a long list. It's a growing list. What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to start to suggest this notion to you of delivery methods. We've got them on the screen here: interviews, interactive videos, gamification, branching scenarios, role play, VR. I'm going to put a few more in here because I think we can do better. I'm going to put in SMS. I'm going to put in intranet pages. Cough, 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 webinars, cough, cough. Terrible spelling. I needed to spell three things correctly. The only one I got right was SMS, which consists of 2 different letters. Everything else, terrible spelling. You get the idea. This is a concept that we can use delivery methods in the real world to deliver our compliance message. And clearly, some of these you may need to think about, how could I use VR? How could I use AR? I think most of those that are on that list there are things that we can wrap our heads on. Maybe we don't use them at the moment because they're tricky, they're hard. How do we get the tick in the box out of them? But it's a good list, and I'm going to leave that list there. I'm just going to make it ever so slightly narrow though, but it's still there. What I'm now going to bring onto the screen is a different list. Now I want you to list the real world success measures or KPIs that you are measured on or could be measured on. Let me give you an example from a sales perspective: an increase in sales, a decrease in customer churn, an increase in the number of one-time sales. From a compliance perspective, less accidents, more reporting of accidents. Viv's raised a good one there. The quality of questions raised to the help desk. I sometimes hear people saying a reduction in questions to the help desk, and I like that. But what if what you want to promote is an increase in questions to the help desk? What if it's a newly promoted help desk, a newly built help desk, and you're trying to raise the profile of it? So we often think from a compliance perspective that it's about decreasing things. Let's decrease the amount of compliance issues. Well, maybe before you do that, you need to increase the amount of compliance reports that are being made in order for people to spot what is a suspicious activity, as Andrew's mentioned there. So it's not all about taking things up or down. It could actually be different sides of the same coin. So think about that. So what we've got here, let's be clear about what we've got. In the chat panel, the main chat panel in the bottom right-hand corner, what have we now created on the screen? From a compliance program perspective, I'm looking for 2 words. They're very similar to one another. If you can't get inside my mind and figure out what I'm thinking, what have we created with these 2 lists? We've created a list of and What have we created? Thank you, Viv. That's exactly what I was thinking. Well, we've got a list of inputs and outputs, haven't we? The potential elements of a compliance program, they're your inputs. The real world KPIs and success measures, they're your outputs. Now, we could leave this open and we could talk about each of these and pull them apart. I'm mindful of time. We don't need to do that because I don't want to get into the weeds of xAPI here. What I am going to do is I'm going to change the screen once more, and I'm going to bring up a book on the screen that you're welcome to download at the end of this session, and I'll give you a link to that. And I'm going to go to a particular page of this book. There it is. It's that diagram that I'm looking for there. Forget the bottom row where it says LRS. Oh, don't forget it, but just I'm going to concentrate about the top row. This talks about mobile devices, retail, wearables, e-learning. Think instead about that saying things like e-learning, face-to-face courses, webinars, intranet, alternate reality, virtual reality, text messages, on-the-job aids. What was the thing that Jonathan mentioned earlier on in the session? Standard operating procedures. What if we also include something like all of the KPIs that you've listed in that previous screen? What if they're all flowing into the LRS, which is the computer monitor that you can see there? What we can start to build with xAPI is an insight into what's really happening in your world, in your employees' world. I'm going to use, in fact, no, I'm not. I'm actually going to use a compliance model. I'm going to use a compliance example. And I'm going to use a very bad one. And for those of you that work in financial services, I'm thinking about one in particular, one attender. You're probably going to roll your eyes at this, but you'll get what I'm talking about. You'll get the analogy. Let's take a look at our IT security team. We know who the top players are. We know, who the best people are in that team, either because their line manager tells us or they're part of a system that is feeding into the learning record store, so we can see who has the most resolutions most quickly, most accurately. Who are our top 5 salespeople? Who are our top 5 IT security people? We can look at that, and we've got 5 names. We can then look at another part of the learning record store and say, show me what their learning activity looks like. And all of a sudden, you might start to see things like this. Those top 5 salespeople watch 400% more YouTube videos on data security than anybody else. Those top 5 IT people participate in 76% more webinars on the subject of data security than anybody else. Those top 5 IT people participate in 90% less classroom training, not about more, less classroom training than anybody else. You can start to build up some models now. Now, I'm very mindful about correlation and causation, and that's where data analysis becomes, an important thing to do. But you can start to get an insight into how are your people performing in the real world. Let's look at their outputs. Then let's look at the inputs that have led to that. And they won't be the only things, of course. They won't be the only things. We can start to build some models. You can then start to say, why don't we start promoting YouTube videos on data security more? Because it's clearly having an effect on these people. Why don't we reduce the amount of classroom training? Because this suggests that it's not really that big a factor for our top performers. Again, correlation and causation. I know someone's going to pick me up on it, so I'm very mindful to caveat it by saying that. That's why I wanted to bring this book up on the screen here, just because of that one diagram there that will get you thinking. Again, you can download this book in a few moments' time. I'm going to leave this on the screen because what I want to take now are any observations, questions, challenges, anything that you've got around this incredibly high level insight, and I know that it was that very high level insight into how you could use xAPI as part of a compliance program. Over to you guys. Questions, Mike? Chantel's typing there. In fact, a few people are typing, so I'm just gonna hang around on this screen. You'll notice I've dropped a few little pods onto the screen here. This book that we're looking at on the screen, you can download that. It's the top option in the left-hand side pod, Learning Technology Manager's Guide to xAPI. That's the bottom option for you. The right-hand side, there's a few links about xAPI you might be interested in. Jonathan, it's a lot to get people's head around, trust me. And I've been looking at this for a couple of years. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to it, and I'm not going to pretend there isn't. It's quite easy to get started, though. Download the book. It's free to download. Download the book. I would suggest looking at the first third and the last third of the book. The middle third, it gets quite technical quite quickly. So, but the beginning and end of the book, you'll be quite clear what I mean by that if you download it. A very, very, very good, down-to-earth, layman's terms example about why you might want to consider xAPI, amongst other things, for your compliance training. Chantel says that looking at the informal activities in employee groups, yes, completely. And you could tap into, if you've got an enterprise social network, Yammer or Jive or Slack or something like that, you could tap into that as well. Chantel's talking about some simplified A/B testing there with a clinical group. Yeah. You're welcome, Helen. I just uploaded it. My boss Ben actually wrote it, so I'll pass your thanks on. I did the easy part, which was put it under your nose. So Chantel's talking about SF Chatter's been used, Salesforce Chatter and Microsoft Teams. You're starting to get it now, Chantel, and I'm sure other people are. It's the real world ways that we all use to get information. How many of us have truly learned to do our jobs, truly, from a piece of e-learning or a classroom course? Truly learned to do our jobs? I'd be surprised if many of you say yes in the chat panel there. Chantel, and I certainly haven't. Absolutely not. I've learned through a range of different resources, some formal, some informal, some online, some offline. That's how people learn to do their jobs. Why not get an insight into that? So when I send the recording out for this afterwards, all of those links that you see and PDF downloads in the bottom of the screen, they will be active. So you'll still be able to click on them at the end of this session. Before you all disappear, we've got about 5 minutes left. I want to ask you to share something with me, if you would. It will be a tremendous insight. I'm just going to change the screen one last time. It would be great if you could click on the T symbol that is on the left-hand side of the screen in that menu bar. Once you've clicked on the T symbol, if you could then just click anywhere on the whiteboard and type in what your key takeaway has been from this session, just like I've done on the screen there. It can be short and sharp. You might have a few takeaways. You might want to write an essay. You've got about 5 minutes to do that if you want to. Just really interesting, what is your key takeaway or takeaways from this session? This gives me an amazing insight into whether the things that I thought were important actually met or resonated with you, or whether actually you spotted something else along the way that you're going to find more valuable. Let me delete my comment there. And whilst you're doing that, if you've got any more questions that we haven't covered that you want to ask, you know what to do. Now's the time to do it. I'm going to do a little bit of spring cleaning on the screen. Just moving a few things around, not deleting anything, and just reordering them, make them a little easier to read. Wow, that got busy quickly. A bit more spring cleaning. Oh, look at that. It's not often you see someone use the word semantic analysis. Well done, whoever that was, well done. Yeah, I think curation can be used for any topic. I think some topics lend themselves to what I would call external curation. You know, if you're running a leadership program, well, you can't go online and not fall over a million articles on leadership or videos. It lends itself to that. Japanese firewalls, I suspect there's less written in the public domain about that, but it doesn't stop us, as you know, Andrew and I discussed earlier. Curation could be coming from your own business. It doesn't have to be external in. It could be from somewhere else in the business. If you're not creating it, you're curating it. So I'm really, really pleased by what we're seeing on the screen here. Is there anything that anybody said there that you don't get or understand? That should be a t-shirt. I'd love to know what I've just said that should be a t-shirt, or what somebody said. If you could let me know in the main chat panel, that would be great. We're coming up to 5 to the hour, wherever you are in the world, so it's clearly time for us to be on our way very shortly. Chantel, I like it. I feel like this is that Forrest Gump moment where he puts his hand on the guy's t-shirt and wipes it, or wipes his face with the t-shirt, and it creates the smiley face. I think we're on to something, Chantel. I'll get in touch after this. We could be millionaires by this time next year. Retirement plan all sorted. It was his face, Quentin, you're right. It's coming up to 1/4 to the hour. Any final questions? All right, Dave. Any final questions, please do drop them into the chat panel. Open your microphone up. I'm going to be hanging around for a little while after this is finished, just to do a little bit of admin and tidy a few things up for next time. So if you want to hang around and ask a question, I'll be here. If you want to be on your way, it only goes for me to say a huge, huge thank you for sparing time this afternoon, this morning, this evening, wherever you are, finding an hour in what I know is always a busy day for you, finding an hour to come along. The recording will be out with you by this time tomorrow at the very latest. Hope you enjoy watching that back and maybe seeing something the second time around. When it's time for you to go, you can close that window down and be on your way. And I hopefully see you online again in the very near future. Andrew, you and I still need to have that steak lunch sometime, that Argentinian restaurant that we like. We'll make that a date at some point. You're very welcome, Helen. No problems at all. I'm really glad that you're able to come along. And I've got to say, this sounds like a cliched thing to say, and you probably think he says this in every webinar. The interaction and the dialogue and the feedback that I've got from you through this has been quite different to many of them that I run. So I don't know whether it's the subject or you, clearly not me, because I do these all the time. So whatever it is, there's something's changed there. I'm really pleased that you were here to help move that along. Thank you. You're very welcome, Viv. And Emmett, no problems at all. Yeah, do feel free to forward to download that book if you've not already done so. You can download that book from the recording. You're welcome, Quentin. You like my enthusiasm. It's tough at this time of day on a Tuesday when I'm still jet lagged, but I'm pleased that it came across. No worries at all, Andrew. If you're still in the session, thank you, and I hope we will catch up soon.